Welcome to this evening's opening conversation of Proximity Music, States of Fragility. My name's Ceola, and I'll be hosting the discussion today with my four lovely guests. With us, we have Yannik, who's the exhibition curator of Proximity Music and works at III Instrument. I always get it wrong. Instrument Inventors Initiative. I always want to say something else, but yeah. And then 3 of the 9 artists who are participating in the Proximity Music exhibition. So Nandita, Sophia, and Henk. And I just realized I've left my phone over there because it's charging to hotspot your computer, but I have no idea about time. So maybe can I borrow one of your phones to have as a clock?
Yeah, my phone's empty.
Oh.
4%.
Okay.
Leon, can you give me your phone?
Oh, great. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my dear.
I will put it on
Just
airplane.
tell us when you're tired of listening to us and then we'll
Okay.
stop.
I'll put it on airplane for you. Thank you very much. That's very kind. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, Proximity Music is an exhibition hosted by III and Rewire, and it started in 2021, and this is the 4th edition of the exhibition. And Yannik, I wanted to come to you first because you've been working there for a while, and to give a little bit more introduction to the program, why it started, its history, and what it is this year.
Yes, hi. So the program started 4 years ago out of the need of finding ways to listen differently and understand music differently in times of the pandemic. So out of an original stage during the festival of Rewire, in the midst of the pandemic, Bronner and Matteo came up with this idea of if we can't have concert and can't be together anymore in a space as we all needed to be as artists, how can we do this differently? And time-based works and installations allowed at one point to come together again and still experience and share the experience and the sensory experience of listening, but also triggering other senses. And as a music festival that was always pushing the boundaries on its own, I think Rewire was also very interested in diving deeper into this idea of how installations can have a place in there. And this was in 2020, and then I was working as a volunteer, and Pelle is sitting over there, one of the artists of the show as well, and I was volunteering for him in this basement actually, where now Sophia's work is, so we see it's a small world and a small cycle, and then just continued working with them, and I always had a special idea of what is unorthodox approaches is, and how we can find new ways of experiencing the world. And with Proximity Music, we try to do this. And this year, the title is States of Fragility, which reflects on a feeling that I personally have, but I think also a lot of other people feel. The world is slowly moving out of balance. I read the news, and environmental catastrophes happen more and more frequently. You can feel the change in temperature in every part of the world, but also very directly here. Societies are falling apart. Geopolitical tensions all across the world, from Ukraine to Afghanistan to Palestine, everywhere are boiling and getting out of control. And in all of this, we often say more, but we listen less and we understand less. And we hope with this exhibition to bring together 9 voices that allow to listen and to tune in and to understand these different layers in the world. Yeah.
Can I ask you a little bit more about what you mean by fragility?
I think we're often afraid of fragility and think that it's a weakness to be fragile, but fragility can be an immense strength in the form that if we allow to be soft, if we allow to care for each other, if we allow to be there for each other, we can grow stronger together and find balance. And we need to appreciate this type of fragility, I think. Yeah. How do other artists relate to that?
Yeah, well, my next question was going to be, I would love all of you to introduce yourselves, a little bit about your practice, but also how you see the work you've contextualized, the work of the installation work that you've developed for the program, how you contextualize it in the theme of the exhibition, States of Fragility. So, Nandita, maybe we can start with you.
Okay, usually I'm the slow processor, but sure.
You don't have to go first.
Oh, cool.
Okay, cool.
Just get me off the mic. So I'm based in Goa, India, and I've been practicing as an artist between the intersection of art, science, tech, and community engagement. And one of the main reasons of this intersection happened when I moved back to India. And I was seeing how much change had happened in the last 20 years since I'd sort of gone back. And, you know, there was population pressure, but simultaneously we were going through an industrial revolution, which Europe had already gone through. And there is a huge environmental impact happening in different, but simultaneously to that, the pedagogy level in terms of environmental awareness was also at a low time, completely like, you know, I would say like people were ignorant or choosing to be ignorant. So how do you generate conversations in a population where the education level is so variant and where there's none at all, there's a language in terms of like reading. Some people just may not be able to read. Some people, you know, they have like bare minimum education happening. And so it's sort of, I got enticed in sort of building compositions and scores out of data and looking at creative methodologies, how to get like pedagogical movements happening within different sections of the community. So that's where the public engagement became very necessary. And so I sort of started with this project that I'm showing you in the States of Fragility, is where I landed up collecting statements, incorrect scientific statements or political statements made in regards to the environment. And it all started with this one statement where I'm based in Goa. They declared coconut is not a tree. And though it does sound very amusing, because it does not have branches, that was the logic that was given. With that sense of humor, I just saw that there was so much distraction and from the main discourse that was so needed to be activated, that I started collecting all these strange, ludicrous, sometimes extremely intellectually made statements which were completely false. And sort of started looking at ways of getting people to read about it, but also use them as entry points to discuss different issues existing in the environment because it's so complex, and the lenses that one could look from. How it connects to states of fragility. I mean, we are, I think, to accept, to be vulnerable, to be knowledgeable, increases the level of depth and empathy to the other, which is the other than the human, and actually becoming fragile and sort of, I would just say like, I think doors and windows open when you are like hurt and you are fragile and you are receptive. And so I hope like curations and systems like this, when they're designed, open up different ways of engagement with environmental issues across the planet, because it is a planetary issue.
Maybe also because obviously you're saying that the environment and the topics you talk about are fragile, but also in your work it's a lot to do with truth. And maybe truth is also very fragile, and the misuse of information to create mistruth.
But what is truth? I mean, that's what this whole generation is about. Like you know, it's like really wading through and trying to figure out, is this the truth? Is this false? And like, at first we would take truth at face value. Now with so many layers that have been introduced, like an onion skin, it's like an onion, right? And so as you discover it, there's also pain, and it's, yeah, I hear you, but who owns the truth?
So you don't see truth as fragile, you just see it as multi-layered?
Truth is the hardest thing. I think it's extremely fragile. People, to take truth in, I mean, one has to accept, I think you lose relationships. I mean, you're blunt about certain things, but that truth may be from my perspective and not from your biological perspective at all. So,
thank you.
It's always meandering.
Okay, Sophia, over to you.
Hello. Wow, that was loud. My name is Sophia. I'm also presenting together with Nandita. Nandita is here on the ground floor. I'm in the basement, as was announced earlier. I'm presenting a new work, but to be precise, it's a rendition of my older work, and it makes a lot of sense because state of the world change, so works change, approaches change. I'm presenting a work which is called Spomeny, which in Ukrainian means memories or memoirs. And this work was initiated during my time in art science. I'm Ukrainian, but based in the Netherlands. And I studied art science in Quebec, which is around the corner. And I started this work in 2018. Then we were working as a class project in a shipyard in Amsterdam. And then part of the cabling system with the shipyard was this insulation pipes to protect cables while it was raining and it was water. And what was quite interesting, and that did catch my attention, but was not part of the work, is that most of the people who back then worked in the shipyards in Amsterdam were Ukrainians from Odessa, because ships come from that type of ports, and then people stay working there throughout the seasons. And then most of the communication between in the shipyards was in Russian and Ukrainian, and it was quite interesting to see this kind of context. And I created a sound installation out of these pipes, which were reconnecting spaces and environments. But then times changed, invasion started, and everything. My reality changed, and this installation didn't mean what it used to mean, so I reworked it, thanks to Rewire and AI. So now it's a collection of found footage, collected footage, generated footage, and everything from my trips to Ukraine in the past 2 years. And it's donated footage from my friends, family, and fantastic sound artists who wanted to donate their footage of everyday reality in Ukraine for the past 2 years. So it comes from very sweet moments to completely horrific explosions and sirens and constant interruption of reality with sirens. And to tie it all together, there's a lot of very personal and very fragile, as we talk about fragility, my testimonies and kind of very small stories of what I got to experience while being in Ukraine or while being abroad while everything was happening. So that's what you can listen to downstairs. So it's kind of a bit of a maze with lots of fragile pieces from my reality translated into yours. So that's the piece. So that's how I relate to the topic.
Can I ask how it's been working with something so fragile and very close to you and developing the project and adapting it? How's that process been?
It was quite interesting. We discussed it with Yannik today. I worked a lot with phenomena, and I'm a lot very visual and very kind of visual driven. And this is a good change for me in the past 2 years when this didn't feel enough anymore. And I was going more and more personal in the way I approach things and the way I share things, because not doing this was just very difficult. And it was interesting to work with footage I collected and then kind of translating it into written stories and then recording them. There was a lot of very interesting processes happening while recording, and how to give this information, how to make it not too heavy but also be true with what it is, and kind of make it funny, or kind of it was funny, but it's not funny. It's kind of all this kind of very gentle things. But yesterday we were, so we edited each, there's many channels, we edited each channel separately. And then yesterday, on some point, we turned everything on, and then I started panicking. It felt like too much, everything was everywhere, and it was really stressful. But then now I think it's getting there. I'm getting there. Now it feels good.
Nice, thank you. Henk, last but not least, who are you?
Okay, fragility. I made an installation in 2019, and it was quite dangerous for the audience. So I thought I stay every day at the installation to make sure nobody gets wounded. So the audience was very fragile. And it was a sound piece, and so people could lay down and listen. And then I discovered that when somebody is listening, they're beautiful. but they're also fragile, because you can hear something you might not want to hear, or you hear something which is not your thinking at all, but an opposite thinking. And I thought that is a fantastic thing I want to explore more. This idea of that listening is opening up, but also opening to your own fragility, to your own hang-ups, your own opinions, and maybe somebody else cuts right through that. So then, when I made Last Sound for What2 Arts Festival, first of all, in a very early stage.
And Last Sound is the name of Henk's installation. Just saying that that's a name, in case people don't know.
Very good.
Thanks.
I thought, you see, when you go to a museum and you see Van Gogh hanging on the wall, you have an exchange with Mr. Van Gogh, because he looked in the mirror and then he painted, so you were one-to-one. And I thought it would be nice to make an installation when the maker is almost absent. So you listen not to the voice of me, but you listen to yourself in relationship to the world. And then I came up with an idea to have software designed whereby we have an enormous amount of sounds of the world, with depth microphones from deep inside, or all kind of sounds of the natural world, and to have information, real live stream data, which will come in the computer, and he will allocate, translate those information about that the wind changes or the CO2 level is going up or down, which is measured every time in The Hague, every 5 seconds they're measuring it, to translate that into the sound. So the world is composing a sound world, if you like. And the voice is not necessarily my voice, but it's the audience listening, becoming vulnerable to the environment they're living in, and they maybe have not listened to before in that intense sense. I think that's sort of it for now.
So when you're translating the data of the change in carbon dioxide?
Sorry?
When you're monitoring the data of the change in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in Den Haag?
That happens real time, eh?
How do we hear it as an audience?
You don't hear that.
What do you,
But the computer thinks, for example, the CO2 level is changing. That means that there's a little ball, a mouse, in a big amount of landscapes of sounds. He moves to the right. And now the wind changes. That means that the machine moves the little ears to the left. So it's manipulated by all the sensors describing our world, but the sensors we don't have. We cannot sense CO2 level goes up or down. Our natural experience is limited because we're watching the traffic and we're watching the concrete, and we are not in touch in that sense with this world under our feet.
But when it's moving, how do I, in the installation, experience that change?
Because suddenly there will be a complete different sound world all around you. And because we have 64 speakers, it's also not that there's one speaker making a statement, but 64 spatially designed, all independently wired speakers will create a landscape, if you like, in which you have no longer individual voices, but it becomes like a world you're in and experiencing by listening.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
It sounds quite complicated, but of course, and I hope you come and see it, then you will naturally accept that I hope that you will not think of speakers anymore, but you just have a sensation of listening and the beauty of listening. And that way, hopefully, you become vulnerable. Yeah. Because I agree with you, there's a power to it too. It's very nice to listen to other people and sound.
Yeah. Okay, well, because we're talking about things that none of you experienced, and I actually haven't experienced, well, I experienced your two, but not Henk's, we thought it would be nice to play some audio from the installations. So Hendrik, maybe could we start with Henk's, just as you were talking about it. It's in the top one, I think. Could you tell us, Henk, a little bit about what we were hearing?
Well, yeah, of course. I've just now we have two speakers doing exactly the opposite of the 64 speakers, but that's okay. But it's quite because the 64 try to not have that it comes from there and it's telling you something. The 64 speakers can do, because they're very soft, create a landscape, immersive landscape. You move in and you go towards different areas. So you listen to all kind of sounds we have recorded in field recordings, and also we animate, the speakers animate things which are put in the speakers with the frequency sometimes so low that you can see the frequency. But if you put stones in or earth from The Hague, then you can hear the rattling, if you like. But if it was just a recording of 24 hertz, then you don't hear anything. So we use the speakers in a very different way than normally, also to animate material.
So kind of their instruments as well as mouths.
Yeah.
And how come you use these ambient sounds? What's the purpose for you to work with that kind of sound?
Sorry?
How come you use ambient sounds? You're saying you go out and you record, do field recordings. Like, how come you chose to use those sounds specifically?
I don't quite understand.
So when I asked what were the sounds in the recording, you said we've gone out and done field recordings of outside or...
So sound from inside the earth, from very deep in the earth, from ambient sound in nature, all those sounds as a library we have, and then the software will allocate different sounds specifically to that moment in time when certain data comes in.
Okay, thanks. Nandita, I wanted to come back to you and talk about, so I see in all your projects that you use sound as information. You also use sound to reshape architecture and spatial narratives, which I want to get to later. But also, you use materials, all of you, in a particular way, either to listen to sound or to hear through. So Nandita, you touched on briefly that you use... what I'm not going to preface. What is the contents of the sound that we hear, and why do you use that specific sound?
Will you be playing?
Tell us, and then maybe we'll listen so we can give a bit of suspense. Yeah, why not?
Okay, so I mean, I didn't really describe the project in depth that much, but I collected all these 91 statements and then I put them through an AI algorithm which generated haikus of the same word from those statements. So they became like little cheeky poetries, or like they were like tongue-in-cheek in certain ways. Some were serious feedbacks, you know. So they were just observations on like haikus are, on nature and environment. So when it came down to building a composition out of this, so this composition is also a book. And in the book, I had to figure out how to divide 91 essays on different topics. And so I divided them into different elements, which were earth, water, fire, and void. And void becoming about policy and law. Earth and water being very obvious. Fire became global warming, perhaps, or mining. Earth became mining. So when it came down to the composition section, basically we created 5 different compositions related to these elements. And I collaborated with 5 sound artists. One of them, we collected waste and we made foley. So I requested her to make the weather out of the waste. So that meant like weather for fire, weather for void. So for example, she used empty bottles, whichever we both gathered, and then she put in mics and got the resonant sound. Water was ice and a lot of other things, we played around with. And so there was a huge foley of I had a huge garbage collection basically, and everyone was sort of laughing because as I sort of started getting packed as art objects and being created around, it was fascinating for the packers. So the second part of the composition was all these statements, I basically went over the internet. I obviously couldn't travel to all these places across the planet. I tried to capture Foley, whatever was present, whether it was in, say, in a news thing, recording, field recordings from within other people's documentation, interviews, talking about the topics that were very present in those statements. And this archive was handed to the artist, Felicity, and then she basically picked up the Foley sounds, picked up the, you know, the all the, I would say, the noise era that we live in terms of sound, and created one layer of composition through that. And the third layer was I worked with 3 vocal artists to actually vocalize the graphical notation scores that were built out of the haikus. And that's how these compositions have been built. So it's also a live performance with this pianella, which looks like a printing press. And I call it like it sort of is a giant lava lamp, because the pattern never really repeats. It's always different, because the whole composition has been made out of the glitch of the code, as well as there is a speed variation happening within the piano. There's an algorithm running, and there's an invisible hand. And so what you hear right now is a 4-channel sound, and the pianella being the 5th channel.
Okay, maybe can we listen to it, Hendrik? So just to recap your process, you took statements, you gave them to an AI algorithm which made them into haikus. You worked with 3 voices to then vocalize them, and also with another musician, composer, to create the kind of soundscape with it.
So you have to just see this as research, right?
Yeah.
And then you're giving like different protocols to everyone.
But I was interested in why you work with an AI algorithm to create the haikus, and then also you're saying the pianola is has another AI.
No, it doesn't have an AI. It's just an algorithm that's running, and it sort of creates a variation in speed.
Okay.
So basically, when the AI generated the haikus, it's not perfect, and this was pre-ChatGPT and all this AI stuff that happened. And so I actually manually edited out all the grammatical errors, and then there was some creative editing, and that's where, wherever there was glitch, it was punched out. Thank you.
Okay, because the punching sound is the pianola? How do you say that word?
Actually, I couldn't figure out, like, I think, is this a mix of 2 sounds?
No, we took it from your website in the end.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was trying to figure out what happened. Okay.
But the punch sound is...
the punch sound was basically the making process.
Okay.
So the thing is, when you're working with a 40-foot score, because it has 91 haikus coming out of 91 statements, first of all, you can't print a score which is 40 feet long. So I challenged the printer, and then when I automated the whole thing. I wanted it to be like cut out by a machine, but the thing that wouldn't have been possible. So it became a manual thing. And so I sort of basically, during the pandemic, started throwing punch parties and getting my friends to punch, because it made really interesting sounds. And I started seeing the process as part of the making, because it is a community-driven endeavor. I don't see myself as an isolated person working on this project. And so it became a really interesting percussion instrument for me.
Thanks.
So there are like different layers in there.
Lots of collaboration. Sophia, maybe talk a little bit more about the content of the sound material, and why you chose those specific sounds. You kind of spoke about this a little bit, but if there's anything to add.
I already mentioned kind of construction of what my installation consists of. So, but ideologically, conceptually, it was structured in a way that was my recordings, so field recordings which I collected in the past 2 years. There was found footage, so everything available. So mostly for news channels, for day-to-day reality. Ukrainians use Telegram channels. This is where you get all the information from. And then there's a lot of videos circulate and a lot of kind of sounds of everyday reality or some kind of danger, which are publicly available for this channel. So this was collected. Then in the past few weeks, there was a lot of attacks. So some of these are Instagram stories from people who I asked if I can use this in the installation, and some of it is donated footage. So friends, artists, everybody who's currently in Ukraine were sending me soundscapes of their daily reality, which change a lot. Some of that from my friends, so they're messages which are recorded to me or shared to me of them telling me what's happening with them. That's Ukrainian footage you'll hear in installation. And lastly, it's my stories, so you'll hear my voice. Kind of guiding you through specific moments, and range from me being in Ukraine, me being in the Netherlands, and me traveling, so in being in the road. So yeah, that's kind of the main capacity of things, of the pool of things. And you will hear them through the pipes in different times of the installation, so you will have to kind of search and explore, and you will hear different bits, and then you compose your own reality.
Thank you.
And are we going to listen to my sound?
Oh yeah, we are going to listen to Sophia's sound. Sorry, thanks.
So what we're going to listen to is a recording from my phone. So it's terrible quality. You're welcome. Yeah, it's my phone being terrible. But there's a, I heard it before. Is it that low?
The bus.
I will tell you what it's supposed to be. You'll hear it in the installation, don't worry. In the installations, I couldn't find the file from the installation, so I sent it to you directly from my phone. There's a clicking sound. Besides, underneath the buzz, there's like kind of a clicking sounds. And it's a clicking sound, which is very specific to Ukrainian railway. Because the cups for tea in Ukrainian railway are a metal cup holder and a glass cup inside, but it's not perfect fit, so there's a space in between. So when the train moves and the cup stands on the table, it creates this kind of clenching sound between the metal and the glass, which is very specific to Eastern European trains. And because part of the narrative of the work is being in the road, or either going to Ukraine, traveling within Ukraine, or going out, it's very important sound, which is kind of always there when you're traveling. It's a very specific, unique sound to this, which I know it's in childhood, and I never thought about it as being like a sonically interesting thing. Besides, I was in a train now I was going for Christmas, and you will hear about I never knew a bus trip can be a 10-page essay. It's all in there. It's an interesting bus trip. You can listen to it downstairs. It was 40 hours. It was 40 hours bus trip. A lot of things happened. But then the moment of traveling between Kyiv and Odessa, it's one night, like overnight train. Then this recording is from there, the cup. And there's also a little Easter egg that the cup, this kind of cup, is also downstairs. You can find it. It's physically there. It doesn't sound. You can move it, but it's also there. So that was non-working sound. Yeah. I had a beautiful sound designer working with me. Their name is Imer Marinus. So they picked up a lot of my bad recordings. I tried to have a proper sound recorder with me in Ukraine. This doesn't work. Like as soon as something happened, I started pulling it out. It doesn't work, so everything is on the phone. So everything is terrible quality, which is the good part of it.
I find phone quality can be all right. The recorder.
The phone one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm surprised, but also sometimes I'm out and I want to record something and I do it, and then I'm like, oh, I should have brought my Zoom. But then actually I'm like, oh, it sounds all right.
I can hear art science in my head when we were forbidden to use phones for recording, because I hear Robert Pravda in my head, like forbidding me to do this, so I feel very guilty always. Okay. But well, times change, situation change.
Yeah, you can't control when you want to record.
Exactly.
Thank you. Maybe if it works later, we can try again at the end, possibly.
as soon as you hear a clicking sound downstairs, that's the cup.
Yeah. Yeah, also Sophia...
So you all now need to go there and find it. That's the assignment.
Yeah, after the talk, you'll also be able to visit Sophia and Nandita's installations in the building, so be able to hear it. Yannik, I want to come to you, but so far we've kind of been talking about these three artists. I wanted to go, the conversation's kind of going from in to out, so kind of the nitty-gritty of the sound, the material they're using, and then how we as the audience hear it, and then also how we experience it in space. But I also, coming to you, I know that you've done a lot of thinking about the framing of the exhibition and how kind of the artists work in political and societal systems and also ecological systems. And with your background and you as a creator, I'd love to understand, your interests and how that's formed the framing, and then how you've chosen the artist to enter into the exhibition in those contexts.
Mm-hmm. So I think there's some framing that comes always very naturally if you talk about a project like this. There's a music festival. There's some obvious connotations. So I wanted to have I wanted to work with something that is not where you can stay in, where you can really slow down. Or I wanted maybe to find something for myself where I could slow down with. So all the installations are durational experiences in which you are actually free. Only one is a performance because it's so beautiful that it had to be in there. From Mira Ida, highly recommend. She will perform 3 times a day. A very beautiful piece, Second Breath, in which she expands her own lungs in a performance with a self-made instrument. But it was important that the works allow you to find your own pace and be there for a longer time. And then, on the other hand, I never studied in the arts and started autodidactic 3-4 years ago, coming from a background of political science. And for me, today exhibitions are still visual essays to a certain extent. I hope this one is a visual essay, but also definitely a sonic journey in that regards. So I have questions and wonder around things, and I'm in a lucky position as a curator to ask artists and makers to answer this question with me, or give me other insights, or give us other insights, and then in the end translate this to an audience in form of an exhibition. On the other hand, it was also very important that each work on its own is a world for itself and tells a story completely. And you can go to any of these installations and you will have a great experience, but if you go to all of them, a much bigger picture opens up and all the links and ways come together. I would love to talk about methodological approaches. I must say I don't have one. I'm very much following my gut when it comes to this. So it starts very organically, and I saw a couple of works. I saw Marco Fusinato's Desastres 2 years ago for the first time, and was blown away, not knowing why it just was very much close to my heart, to the way how I think or feel, and I always wanted to do something with it. And then this chance came up, and then this was one part of the selection, and then slowly, very organically, the theme emerged more and more. So it's a year-long process of finding out which are these works, and then also working with our residents within III, that give some sort of direction, the world and everything that happens all around, that gives some direction. And then a lot of hints. It's coincidences. It's Sophia recommended Nandita to me because she said, "You would love this work." A dear friend in my studio next door, I was like, "Hey, I'm working on this and I don't really know where it's gonna go. Do you know anything that is interesting?" And then he was like, "Maybe you should check Henk." And then we had this most beautiful conversation, and then also out of this, the theme shapes. So it was never intended to become States of Fragility. It became States of Fragility through all of these conversations and thoughts sparking with each other, and then trying to find balance and see how to get all of these very different worlds also together into one place.
And you kind of touched on this, but the different locations of each work. So we have 2 in this building, Henk is at Paleiskerk, but how did you how did you find and imagine the right spaces for each work? Because I also want to come to the artist now and talk about more the spatial and sonically spatial aspect of the installation. But before, you chose where everybody is being located.
I wouldn't say choose. We made suggestions. So I was in conversations with. Everything is always in conversation. There's no, I don't want to be a person that is saying like you're gonna be there. It will always be a conversation. And it was feeling the works and then running around often enough in The Hague and knowing a lot of locations and then trying to find the best fit. And sometimes this is also a very tricky fit. We have a library here that is the absolute most gorgeous location for Nandita's work, talking about haikus and being in the American embassy. Same also for Sophia, with the political connotation of everything. Being in a former embassy building, I think, fits very well in that regards. But the library doesn't want to be drilled in, and has a lot of spirit on its own. So we had a very difficult install. Or Andrius' work is a 7-meter long instrument that is suspended from a 8-meter tall truss construction. The church is on the first floor, but for both of us it was in the get-go clear that this is a perfect location, which means you carry up 150 kilos a stair for 3 days. But it's worth it to find the perfect locations where the works resonate with the space. And it's all about resonance, because if it can't unfold right, why are we doing it? Yeah, we tried. Let's hope. You all decide if this worked, after all.
Henk, I wanted to ask you how, so in your installation it's 64 speakers, and you're kind of combining environmental ambient sounds with this real live data of changing environmental qualities. And then what are you trying to do spatially for the audience?
Yes, so because you have many speakers, it's not so crucial. Well, you have movement. The church becomes the instrument. The acoustic becomes part of the whole thing. And the acoustic is so good for this work because you can't tell exactly sometimes where the sound comes from. So it loses its speaker recorded sound idea, which I tried earlier to explain. I want the sound at that moment to be created, if you like. So for example, there are 40 different recordings of rain, depending on how the moist near the sea is in The Hague, the sound suddenly will change. And so that happens at that moment, that specific moment. There's no recording of that event. It is created at that moment by the computer using these sound examples. And that's why 64 speakers are important, because if you do it with 2, you find out too much the human touch in it. And I want you to be in touch with something outside of me and of you, to be able to open up, to become vulnerable to what is at the moment happening in the world, as far as the environment is concerned.
So how are the speakers located?
Related?
Located, where are they positioned?
Well, we have 24 around. Then we have a group of 24 very near each other, so for you to go close to it. You know, we noticed in Belgium that children, for example, like to come very near a speaker, so it's a bit like Pied Piper, very soft sound, because then you attract rather than you push them away. Then we have a big construction to create very low sounds with 2 metal plates of 200 kilograms of 3 meters long, who have exciters, and they can create very, very deep sound. You feel it more than you actually can hear it. I think I did it once in another church, in that particular speaker, and especially pregnant women would come to me to congratulate me with that they felt somehow very special when they were standing next to it. And you could hardly hear a sound, but they were obviously very open to this particular frequency.
What frequency was this?
It's about 42 hertz.
Okay.
Have you You sort of.
I play around with frequencies.
Yeah.
Just curious.
It's just very interesting that people respond. It's a physical experience listening. It's not just and you do it with your whole body. So these sheets are very big, and so they explore that. And so you have very different ways of relating to the space and to your ears and to your whole body. And small and big speakers.
What was the experience for you once finishing setting up here? Because it's the first time you've installed in this environment. How did it go?
Because it means you have to change everything.
Okay.
I mean, it's a beautiful acoustic, but yeah, it's shocking, and you think, oh, we have got 2 days to adapt the software to do everything, but it's very exciting, you know. Mm-hmm. And we still. I would like to change tomorrow morning something before 12.
I love it how you look at Yannik to check it's okay.
So, I'm over. No, but it's working. But of course, you then think, hey, I've got this opportunity now, and I already had some very interesting feedback from III. One person said, it was very interesting. He came up to me and he said, actually, there with this sound, I can hear the speaker, and I thought that's exactly what I don't want, and it's exactly right you say this. So we turned it down, and then somehow then it became part of the environment. The church became the instrument. And that's fascinating, you know, that I haven't explained anything, you know, but somehow things communicate, and I was very pleased with it. And we had other people as well, and just where they stand or they move on. There was one student from Robin, the software designer, and he was saying immediately, oh, this is too soft. And it's wonderful, because you've been so much in your own little blob that you sometimes can't hear anymore what's happening.
Yeah, it has become a bit numb. Nandita, I'd come to you talking about the installation of your work spatially and your desire and intention with the audience.
I know. I'm just thinking. You know, this installation has moved in a few places, and for me, you know, because I've been exploring how information and data can flow through really interesting methodologies, and one of them is sound and visuals. I felt like the library was like a perfect fit in terms of like data interpretation and how things could be like, you know, unfold in there. But, you know, I also during my research had the maximum amount of fake news coming from the Americans. So it felt very apt in the American embassy itself. In terms of sound, you know, see, I was in India, so the space was selected pre-hand, and I obviously couldn't have a sonic understanding. But then I think in the last 2 days, it is such a beautiful space in terms of light and sound, and it's, you know, been playing around with placing speakers in different places and building a landscape, and I love making landscapes, data landscapes. And in terms of sonically, I think it fit beautifully, absolutely, with the words and the piano playing there. In terms of spatial, I think, you know, with the speakers that I've used, the cone is pretty narrow, so you can direct and play around in a lot of different ways, and I think it's warm in there, the resonation, and for me, that's what I really like. I wouldn't say more to it, because usually, like, this is the first time I've sort of broken out into a five-channel sort of sound installation. Usually I build objects that are interacting with sensors, and so this, and the space is the object, because it's usually glass which becomes a resonation chamber. So this, in terms of this installation, it has been like more outward-inward, and that's an inward-outward movement. And it works. That's, for me at least, it definitely does work.
And this is the 4th time you've exhibited the work, or what number of times you've exhibited the work?
This will be the 5th time.
5th time, okay. Yeah. So you've tried lots of different environments.
A lot of different places, basements, gallery settings, and this would be the first library, yeah.
Cool. So Sophia, to you also, the spatiality of your installation, the sonic spatiality, and then the intention with your audience.
So my installation is it's 1 kilometer of piping. So you listen through the pipes, and then they have the life of its own. It's a material you can control only so much. You can shape it, but it kind of rolls in its own way. We have 12 outputs. We have 6 channels, 12 outputs. Some of them are doubled, but they're durational, so you won't necessarily come across the same thing. And then there's a lot of metrages of it. Most of them are 50 meters. And then they're spread out through the space. So whenever you see the light, you can grab it and start listening. And it's embedded in the basement, so it feels like it's part of a basement and something went terribly wrong. They feel like they belong there or could be there, but then it's a huge quantity, which always has a kind of this nice play to it. It's something is kind of not right.
But it's also like a bunker, right? You know, like underground. And all the
kind of.
The topics that you're talking about, there is.
Yannik said to me on some point of build of it feels like a bomb shelter, and then it's very well ties with one of the stories when I tell you that I never made it to the bomb shelter. So I can't play around with saying like this is a basement of American embassy, which obviously was used to bring up cars, because what I found in the corner was like a device to check underneath the cars. And it was standing there, and we were thinking for a day, like, what is this? And they're like, oh, that's a mirror for underneath the car. So we utilize the space quite well in terms of like, it feels like this kind of guts of the space, this whole piping system. And then there's a booth in the middle of the space, like in the corner of the space, there's a booth which obviously was used as a kitchen plus kind of an office, I think, of whoever was monitoring the space. And then I called it context room during build-up, but then there's one pipe there with the kind of a little context moment with a cup, and then the narrative changes there dramatically. So there it's something very, very different. Like, it's not very different, but it's a different tone of voice, what I'm telling you. So we utilize the space quite well in that sense of it's a composition throughout.
Yeah, and I think experiencing it felt as an audience I had a lot of freedom to explore. So I think it is quite fragmented and bitty, because each pipe that you listen to has a different narrative, or depending when you're listening to it, and then you have that little room. But then it is a whole because of the way you visually see it. So it was not a labyrinth, that's too extreme, but there was like kind of this, I've got to go through the mesh to find things. Yeah.
It's a pipe forest of Ukrainian experiences.
In a nutshell.
In one sentence, it's my tagline now. So yes, that's what it is. Technically, there are mid-frequency speakers, which are these boxes, which they're custom printed enclosures, which vacuum seal the speaker, and then you can vacuum seal the pipe onto it. They leak quite a bit, because everything leaks, so you also have this kind of presence of sound in the space, but then it's quite unrecognizable before you take the pipe and start listening. You won't really understand the voices. So that's also part of it. It's kind of like with each pipe you discover more and more of the story, and then you can come back, or things intertwine. What actually was interesting feedback from Yannik yesterday, that it feels like they feel like one story, then you realize that a lot of time passed. Which is quite interesting, actually.
But also sometimes it feels like it's this old like radios. You turn them, you hear like the static sound, and then all of a sudden it goes into the right frequency, and you hear everything clear. This is what happens a lot. You hear all of these layered sounds, and I think that fits also very much again then into this whole world, but also into this moment that Sophia describes when everything is mashed up, and then you take the pipe, and then all of a sudden it becomes clear, and you can experience this one very certain memory moment, grab it physically, have it in your ear, take it in, and then it's going again, it's moving away again, and then it comes closer again.
So you'll have a lot of time, a lot of fun exploring my inside of my head. I'm sorry in advance.
Before we come to an end, I wanted to ask if anyone in the audience had a question about anything.
Satisfied audience, always good.
Yeah. Okay, maybe you can come a bit closer, then we can give you the mic.
My question is quite short. I'm sure you have heard about the 4D studio system. It's a company which is in Amsterdam, and they use on 3 levels speakers, which each speaker is connected to a synthesizer. I think also 36 speakers, and also under the floor. And with this system, so it's called 4D Studio in Amsterdam. This system is very impressive because the computer can place any sound in any place of the space. And you can graphically construct sound in space. I don't know if you have worked or heard about this system.
I know about it, but yeah, I know about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You?
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
We know about it.
but thank you for the tip.
Has anyone tried it?
Sorry?
Have you tried it? Has anyone been in it?
What I do.
Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah.
I listened to it. I never worked with it, but it was
Yeah.
I don't have the available tech.
I'm also.
Yeah, I really want. They also have a place in Berlin, and then also in Budapest. I think that's where they originated 4D sound. But I wanted to go in, but I haven't been in.
Can I say something about it? I mean, what you describe is really like sound speakers as pixels, and you can create an image and goes over the whole space. I mean, what we try to do with the 64 speakers is, in fact, they are different from each other, and they're not all in the same pattern as in pixels to create. So in a way we use that system, but in a very crooked way, if you like. We are sabotaging at the same time that system you just described.
Does anyone else have a question?
Nice. Otherwise, I would really like to invite you to see and experience, listen to the installation of Nandita and Sophia tonight as a little preview for the rest of the program to come. And from tomorrow until Sunday, from 12 till 8, Marco Fusinato, Nandita Kumar, Sophia Bulgakova, Henk, Schut, Janine Verloop, Mira-Ida van der Veen, Andrius Arutiunian, Louis Braddock Clark, and Pelle Schilling are presenting their beautiful works along all the amazing artists of Rewire as part of Proximity Music, States of Fragility. Sorry, I need to do the commercial announcement. Come experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Yannik. Yeah, and thank you for everyone for coming, and thank you, Henk, Yannik, Sophia, and Nandita.